Hello, this is Steven Hour, and we are here with a top 10 video. And today, ladies and gentlemen, I'll be doing my top 10 favorite cop shows of all time. Now, before we get into the list, I want to take into account what criteria are for this list. First off, they have to be at least procedurals, at least have it play somewhat of a role in the story. And also, there can also be like subgenres, like it could be a crime procedural, but it could also have like other genres in it as well to make it different and interesting. Also, take into account, this whole list is like all my lists. It's purely subjective. And if there's a show that you haven't seen on the list, it's either A, I'm not a fan of it, or B, I haven't seen it. And who knows, if I did see it, it would probably be on this list. And I will say, I think I have a bit of diversity. There are some really well-known shows on this list. Others, not so much. Others, more known really across the pond, but not really here in Australia. Or at least, I think so, anyway. But without any further ado, like always, before I get into the top 10, I want to start with some honorable mentions. Honorable mentions go to the TV show Gotham and Lucifer. The reason why they're honorable mentions is that essentially, even though they're crime dramas, well, procedurals, they kind of take different approach. First off, let's look at Lucifer. Lucifer is essentially about the devil. He's retired from ruling hell, and he's moved to have his retirement in Los Angeles. Whilst in Los Angeles, during his retirement, he then stumbles across a LA police detective named Chloe Decker. And after some shenanigans, he eventually becomes her consultant, and they essentially, solve crimes together, whilst at the same time, he's dealing with the fact, family matter, like literally family matters. His family is mostly coming down, like his brothers and siblings, or even other people associated with his celestial being world. But at the same time, we're on the edge of our seats finding out if Lucifer's partner Chloe will find out he is actually the devil. Like I said, it's a bit different, but I can still consider it a crime procedural show, despite the fact it's a bit out there. Gotham is kind of the same thing. Based on of course, the infamous Batman characters, we follow rookie detective Jim Gordon as he rises up the ranks to become essentially the character we know. And essentially the show takes place after the events, of course, Bruce Wayne's parents' tragic death, and essentially we're saying that after their deaths, all the crazy whack jobs come out of the woodwork. Some of the key Batman villains come out, but also some of these characters are evolving to become their comic book counterpart. Now, it is technically still a crime drama. Gordon, that still solve cases, but it's different because it's incorporating a lot of well-known Batman villains to become their canonical Batman villains in the comics. Essentially, these characters are in a transformation. So, even though the crime procedural for these shows do take a back seat, they're still crime. I still consider them crime procedurals, but they just have a different flair and a different theatrical presentation that makes it somewhat different. I consider them crime dramas, despite taking different approaches. You guys may not consider it, and I get that. So that's why they're kind of honorable mentions, because they're not really crime dramas, not really. They're more comic book based shows, but I've decided to incorporate them as honorable mentions because they share some of those similarities. So with that out of the way, let's head into the actual top 10. Kicking off our list is, of course, I guess a show that people really don't really quite know, 21 Jump Street. Now, technically, you would know this, really from the movies 21 Jump Street and 22 Jump Street, starring Channing Tatum and Jonah Hill. But what people don't know is that those films were actually based off a late 80s TV show. Now, 21 Jump Street follows essentially what the films were, though they are drastic in different time. Basically, it's about these undercover cops who can look or pass for teenagers, go undercover in high school, or essentially any teen social event to solve crimes. The show should also be known for being the launching pad to one of the most iconic actors working in Hollywood. And that, of course, is Johnny Depp. Now, technically, Johnny Depp has had many roles prior to the show, but this was really launched his career into the big time, way before before Edward Scissorhands would also redefine his career. Essentially, this is what really started his whole career, I wouldn't say started his career, but it really made him big. I like this show because A, it is kind of different, but in many ways it is a crime procedural show. Basically, Johnny Depp's character and all the other people in question really go undercover to really bust these crimes. And I'd say that they dealt with serious topics way before shows like Law and Order, or even another teen drama show I really like, 13 Reasons Why, did it years later, such as drug addiction, and hell, even some of the nasty side of high school, which I really like. They could deal with these topics, though presented, but I wouldn't say get too in-depth, but still present them in a fun way, but still makes you think at the end of the episode. Now, it should be noted that this series is kind of different in its own way. In Season 3, they introduced a new character named Booker, who eventually got launched into his own spin-off show that sadly only lasted for one season. It also should be known that Johnny Depp ended up leaving the series after 4 seasons, with the 5th season having a sort of different feel and bringing in essentially a completely new character. I love this show. It has an 80s feel and can sometimes be looked dated by more modern audiences, but I feel that it's so fun, and I would love if instead of doing the movies of 21 Jump Street, they should actually go back and do a TV show with a more modern update on the high school and essentially do a way to really investigate the procedural show with a modern update, but also really dive into teen issues, which honestly is not really great for good television. It's also the best way for people to start having conversations about these topics. But of course, even the show was serious, it did have its sense of humor, and I guess it managed to balance that for me. I put it at number 10 because it's not just technically a really crime procedural show, but I like it nonetheless, and I consider it a really great and very underlooked gem in regards to crime dramas of the late 80s and early 90s. So number 10 goes to 21 Jump Street. Number 9. Number 9 is given to Midsummer Murders. Now, for those who've never watched the show, this is one more across the pond. This is not an American show. Basically, the plot of the series is revolves around Detective Chief Inspector Tom Barnaby and later his successor, Cousin John, and basically they solve numerous murders that take place in the picturesque but deadly village of the fictional county of Midsummer. And whilst that's happening, Barnaby has several different sergeants throughout the show's run as his partner. Now, what I like about this, first off, it's a British show, and a British crime drama, and honestly, it was a show that my dad got me into, so I didn't think I would have known about the show if it wasn't for him. Second, the scenery. Like I said, what I liked about the previous entry in the honorable mentions is it takes different place, but also has a different vibe. Like 21 Jump Street, is undercover in high school. Midsummer takes place in a British countryside, which for me is very different and very much stands out. I also have to like Detective Chief Inspector Barnaby, Tom Barnaby. Honestly, he's absolutely so fun to watch. And honestly, I find him one of the most unique detectives probably in any show. I don't know, there's just something about him and the actor that plays him just so great and helps the character stand out. And I like this show. It's nice, it's different, it's completely different. Number 8. Number 8 goes to Walker. Very new. This is honestly one of the newest crime shows I've been introduced to, and it's very new by the time of the making of this video. It's still currently going through season 1. Basically, the show is a reimagining of the long-running series Walker, Texas Ranger. This is a reboot. And as a result, it kind of has a different feel, more of an update. I like how it's a bit of a western thing, which I really dig. Walker follows the adventures of Cordell Walker, a widower and father of 2, and has his own moral code as he returns home to Austin after doing some undercover missions, and essentially tries to reinvigorate back into his home life and work life, basically trying to refine himself. And I just love how the cast is, like his parents, his brother, his kids, all have unique personality. And let's not forget his co-workers, always fun as well. Again, this is a completely reimagining. I really like how it just comes with a different feel and this sort of Western vibe. Again, probably already mentioned that, but I like the Western theme. We don't really get that many law shows about that sort of that old West, not anymore. And ironically, those I think are the more interesting crime dramas because A, those were the first generation of lawmen. So I like that. I also find the character of Walker very sympathetic. He's a widower, and he was suffering, but he's trying to do right by his late wife and is trying to not just fix himself back up, but he's also trying to also help his kids because he realized they've been through it hard. He's been through it hard, but now he's trying to refix that relationship, and I love that bit. It really makes the character for me very sympathetic and very empowering because we want to see him, get everything fixed. But of course, just as he's doing like random crimes, he's also uncovering a bit of a conspiracy about the death of his wife. And I can't wait to see where more of this goes. Now, it's been renewed for a second season, thank God. Where further we go with this, we don't know. But so far, I'm really enjoying it, and I can't wait to see what more adventures we have with Walker. Number 7. Poirot. Another favorite of mine. Again, my dad introduced me to this, just like Midsummer. This was always favorite. Poirot follows the titular character of Hercule Poirot, a Belgian, not French, Belgium private investigator / detective, as he goes solving these cases. He's kind of in this guy's kind of in the same vein of Sherlock Holmes, but he's very different. This Hercule Poirot is a more refined, almost gentleman type, and he's clearly sophisticated in clothing and style, famous for his iconic mustache, a great literary creation by the outstanding Agatha Christie. I absolutely love this. It's kind of like, each episode is like a mini movie mystery. It was like one of those types of things, and I loved every minute of it. Poirot here is one of the most unique detectives. He has this sort of fine aristocrat, and some of his mysteries are some of the most interesting I've watched on television, where we actually get to have really engaging mysteries that actually have me engaged to watch, as in really uncover. Whilst other shows kind of involve family drama or have a political thing, this is one of those shows where there's an actual mystery that we want to solve. I love that bit. And honestly, if it wasn't for the main character to keep tying this all together, of course there's other supporting characters too, but honestly, Poirot is just one of the most famous literary detectives, and this show is one of my favorites. I give it the number 7 spot. Number 6. A Touch of Frost. Another show my dad got me into. And honestly, a lot of these British shows is because of my dad. He got me into watching them as a kid, and I've been watching them more so in my teen years than I think I would have ever. A Touch of Frost follows the character Detective Jack Frost as he unravels crimes and finds the perpetrators. Now this, I just found out this was actually based off novels by R.D. Wingfield. And Frost, basically, even though he's kind of in the British, he kind of reminds you of those old school noir detectives, both how he dresses and how he, interacts with suspects. It also reminds you more of noir elements because he's always on the edge with his superiors as a result of his out-of-the-box, flat-foot techniques to solving crimes. He means well, he has a big heart, and cares for the people around him. Again, I kind of like if I'll be honest, the reason why I like this show is because of Jack Frost, courtesy of David Jason, who absolutely nails this. He kind of reminds me of a British version of Detective Bullock from the Batman comics. I absolutely love how, he's, always trying to figure out the crime bit. And honestly, this reminds me so much of those old noir elements that really draw me to this type of show. And honestly, we don't get that kind of noir elements with crime shows anymore. It's always trying to be modern or hip. I like it when we just have a show that really feels like we're paying tribute to old school. I'm not sure if that was the intention or if that's what the show really does, but that's really got me involved in it. And I just loved every minute of this. And then another show I've gotten into courtesy of my dad. Number 5. TJ Hooker. Now this is the complete opposite. I actually got into the show because of my mother. Starring, of course, the very unique actor, I'll say the least, of William Shatner, who we of course know played Captain J.T. Kirk from Star Trek. TJ Hooker is, if I recall correctly, was a show I think was either in the late 70s, early 80s, and we revolve around, of course, the character of TJ Hooker, who is essentially training new rookie officers, officers, cops, and we find out that he used to be a former detective, who was demoted to street patrol, where he feels he's needed, and basically he's training these rookie cops to become better cops, and most of them are essentially like these guys going around the street trying to solve crimes. I like how we're going back, instead of being like these big detectives, we're going back to the street crimes with these actual, on the beat cops. Again, something we get more with the new show The Rookie, which I highly recommend you go and watch. And I like how TJ Hooker has a bit of a sympathetic, actually does have a sympathetic backstory. And I also like his partner, Officer Vincent Romano, played by Adrian Zmed, who of course you would know played Johnny in Grease 2. I like the chemistry between these two, and honestly, this show is for me just a really fun trip. It's nothing really groundbreaking, but it's fun as hell, and I loved every minute of watching it. And of course, TJ does the famous roll over the car, and basically he's more action packed. William Shatner is great in this role, and it's a bit of a guilty pleasure when you compare it to other crime shows. It feels like it's lacklustering, but I find this fun, and there's nothing wrong with having a show that just makes you feel you want to have fun. I give it the number 5th spot. Number 4, Castle. This was a show, again, my mum got me into, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. Castle revolves around a mystery fiction writer, murder writer by the name of Richard Castle, a novelist who, after one day, gets stumbled into an investigation of essentially a copycat killer of killing people, but using things from his books. He gets roped in to help solve the crime and has a sort of a infatuation with the lead detective, Kate Beckett. As a result, after that case, he then becomes a consultant to Kate Beckett and her team. Now, I like how the two immediately, Kate kind of is annoyed by Castle, but grows to really admire him, and a friendship really is born. And of course, as always with these type of shows, it's hinting of a romantic feeling that we are waiting for them to actually, date. It's sort of drama. If I could give one thing this show has, I think has better than any other show on this list, it's the comedy. Honestly, Castle is probably one of the most funniest characters on the show. He's a genuinely delightful person on screen. But I also like how we've shown moments of him being serious, how he sees, some of these things, crimes that really, not just, gross him out, or even like he's appalled by, showing that he is decent deep down. And I loved every minute of that. The comedy really comes between Beckett and Castle, who I feel just absolutely, just work perfectly well off each other, and provide a good foil to each other. Castle's a bit more open-minded, free reign, sometimes a bit wild, but he's also good at coming up with possible theories, courtesy of clues, sometimes drastic and unrealistic, sometimes very realistic. While Kate is the seasoned professional, but does show she does have a bit of a rebellious side. Honestly, this is a funny show, and I will admit, some of the episodes in the later seasons get a little bit too fantastical or too out there, even for this show. Too out there, but it's still a fun show nonetheless, and honestly, I felt it end on a really great episode. Who knows? I might consider doing this as a television review later in my video on the channel. Coming in at number 3, NCIS. One of the greatest procedural shows probably of all time and responsible for numerous spin-offs. NCIS Los Angeles, NCIS New Orleans, and now in NCIS Hawaii. NCIS is basically not your traditional crime procedural show. It's still set in America, but other than being an actual cop show, it's actually Navy agents. Yeah, where basically they solve the deaths of Army officials, whether they are in the Army, Marines, the Air Force, and the Navy. NCIS stands for Naval Crime Investigative Services, and here we follow its team leader, Leroy Jethro Gibbs, portrayed by Mark Harmon, who's this old, very old agent who's clearly been on the job for years, but it has quite the emotional baggage. And just like that, the previous show has a bit of comedy, this does too, but also its work is its cast of characters, because it's been on for so long. Hell, it's still on the air right now as this video is out. All the supporting characters come and go, but Mark Harmon's Gibbs remains the same. And honestly, I just love this show because it's different. Instead of being a more cop procedural, it's more out there with the Navy and Army deaths, which I like. And honestly, it feels refreshing. And if I could really describe what also makes this great, is most of its supporting characters, I think, overshadow its main character. Characters like Ducky, and Abby Shuto, Timothy McGee, and so on and so forth. You can name all the supporting characters that make this show so great. And if you haven't seen it, give it a watch. You will enjoy it, I guarantee it. Number 2, Criminal Minds. I remember this as a kid. Surprisingly, I was watching a show like this when I was a kid. I would have been like no more than 10 at the time. But Criminal Minds revolves around the FBI's BAU, Behavioral Analysis Unit, where basically they are profilers. They're called in to solve cases, mostly serial killers, and try to profile the criminal. This show really enters dark territory with really trying to get in the minds of a serial killer. Again, just like Criminal Minds, I also like the on-set cast of characters, but even though there is comedy, it's not really the main focus. It's more of the disturbing serial killers that these guys are going up against. And honestly, they do have a bit of personal life thrown in between to set the drama, but really it's catching some of the most sickest criminals probably to ever grace American television. And honestly, if I could describe this show, it is dark, but it's a good type of dark. It's a show about the darkest type of people and the most twisted type of people. So I really think you would really get some enjoyment out of the show because it heads into some dark places. The show recently wrapped up, I think it was like last year or 2 years ago, after 15 seasons. And I say this show did not hold back. We entered some pretty dark stuff. But of course, with number 2, there has to be a number 1. So the number 1 spot goes to Law and Order SVU Special Victims Unit. Honestly, if Law and Order, the original, is considered one of the greatest, one of its sequel series, Law and Order SVU, not only had to live up to that, but I think it is more popular than its father show. It's one of those few shows that is, in many ways, when we think of Law and Order, we don't think of the original. We think of the spin-off. And basically revolve around a group of cops who basically solve some of the most horrific cases, mostly related to some really, really dark topics, such as abusive relationships, gender identity, rape, which is mostly their bread and butter. But I also like how they touch on certain topics, serious issues that this show was willing to go and show both sides, and it also showed the reality of how these types of events tragically turn out. It also stars Olivia Benson, who is now the longest-running female detective, starring in at least, if I recall correctly, right now 22 seasons. And just like NCIS, this shows have also had several spin-offs. Again, the original Law & Order, this is its sequel series, and I say it surpasses the original. Whilst we see both the actual investigating the criminal side, we also see the judicial side with the actual law actually trying to enforce and prosecute these cases. We also see, again, there's other spin-off shows. There was the short-lived Law & Order Trial by Jury, Law & Order
Criminal Intent. And right now there's a new one, Law and Order Organized Crime, which I plan to someday watch once the first full season is out and give my personal opinions on how I view about the show. Honestly, this is one of the greatest cop shows, with honestly not only good cases, but also cases that are so thought-provoking and actually have us ask questions and honestly see both sides to it. And again, just like Criminal Minds showed us dark places, this show gives us a different type of dark. We see a dark reality more than anything else. There's a bit of comedy, but it's not really the main focus. It more comes up sparingly. And again, the on-cast of characters, and just like NCIS and Criminal Minds, as the shows go on, we see new characters come and go. And honestly, despite that, two characters remain the same. Olivia Benson and another detective, Detective Finn, portrayed by Ice-T, who was introduced in Season 2 and is still a part of the show to this day. I declare it the best crime crime drama of all time. And there we have it. Those were top 10 cop shows. Do you agree with this list? What show would you have included? What's your number one? Please write down your opinions in the comments. Until then, this has been the Stephen Hour. And ladies and gentlemen, so long for now.